Nice to have participatory where you get to say words that you believe in. And so I would start with the top, and if you, with the lighter colored, and then if you'll read the darker yellow. Peace in our world. It's from the Tao Te Ching. If there is peace in our world,
there must be peace in nations.
If there is to be peace in all nations,
there must be peace in states.
If there is to be peace in states,
there must be peace in cities.
If there is to be peace in cities,
there must be peace in families.
If there is to be peace in families, there must be peace in our hearts and minds. And now Reverend Ted Tollefson will teach us about the deep roots of peace. Let's give him a warm welcome.
I'm going to remove my mask and probably welcome back another 20% of available intelligence. And at this point in my life, I need every percent I can be mobilized. And we'll come back to Lao Tzu towards the end, because of course, as any important text, there are many ways of reading it. And I want to explore some of those at the end. So I'm going to be talking about first the diversity of peace. And, if you tune your ear to the worldwide channel, virtually every culture has words for peace. In Hinduism, when I was practicing yoga and meditation, at the end we would chant Shanti, Shanti, Om, Shanti, Om. In Judaism, the word for peace is Shalom. In the Islamic tradition, it's Salam, and notice how close they are as cognates and cousins. The Romans spoke of Pax. In Chinese, and I actually got this from Trivia, who was lucky enough to grow up in China as the son of Christian missionaries. People used to greet each other by saying Ping Ho, which means peace and harmony, peace and harmony. And in Lakota, it's Wolakota is their word for peace. And of course, I have an Anishinaabe word for peace, which I do not want to do harm to. Anishinaabe, like Sanskrit and German, is built on compounds, and I cannot begin to do justice. So the interesting thing about if you look into any single word for peace, it generates a complex web of meanings. So I'm going to start to see if I can untangle that complex web and to discover what I take to be the deep roots of peace. The dimensions that are called upon in every culture where peace is valued. And just because I'm talking about 4 does not mean that's the end of the list. Okay? And if you're listening to me speak and the part of you that knows what's true begins to speak to you, please follow that stream, for heaven's sakes, because you might help discover a 4th, a 5th, or a 6th dimension of peace. So, first dimension, deep peace is the absence of conflict and strife. It is the presence of unity and harmony. In the Islamic tradition, the key to experiencing divine unity is to surrender. And one of the meanings of Islam is, I surrender. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, the key to unity and harmony is to stop the culturally sanctioned habits by which we divide ourselves from the unity around us and the unity within us. In the mindfulness practice that many of us enjoy, we give our gift of undivided attention to the world around us and the world within us. And we come to experience the deep peace of belonging. Be where our being and our longing are one thing. For many of us, the path to peace may involve taking a walk to a place that is familiar or new, a place that we come to love. And when we do this with an open heart and mind, we engage in what the Japanese now call forest bathing. And it works. And when we experience that deep peace of wild things, it comes like a thick fog or earthbound clouds along the edges of the Kinney or Lake Pepin. And we may discover that we are water walking in water. Because we're about 90% water. And one could argue that we are water made conscious occasionally, that is immersed in a world that is made of water. And so we can experience when we take a walk, and I invite you to do so after we separate from this lovely place. Ping ho, peace as harmony and beauty in every step. So that's the first sense of deep peace, harmony and unity. Second root of deep peace is the presence of justice and the absence of injustice and oppression. And you're going to be hearing about one of our favorite forms of injustice in January. Martin Luther King spoke of just peace because, of course, he knew the Hebrew Bible inside and out, as saying that peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of justice. We human beings have an unfortunate habit of dividing ourselves into armed camps based on accidental traits like skin color, gender, class, religion, or politics. Just peace is an active movement that discloses the presence of injustice, by which we sometimes afflict our neighbors, and then calls us and our leaders to stop the unequal distribution of resources and punishment. Some of us came to a moral awakening during the civil rights movements, the anti-war movements, the women's rights movements of the 1960s and 70s. And let's give ourselves credit. Some significant victories were won. People of color actually got to vote in the old Confederacy. Women got to choose a safe and legal abortion or not. And our senseless and unwinnable war in Vietnam came to an end. But notice, these victories are temporary. Texas and many parts of the old Confederacy are doing their absolute best to make it impossible to vote if you're not white, and impossible for women to get a safe and legal abortion. And our national fixation on unwinnable wars has continued beyond Vietnam in Iraq and Afghanistan and a dozen countries whose names we barely know. So that second sense of deep peace is to move towards justice. The third root of deep peace is nonviolence. Deep peace is the absence of violence and the saving presence of binding agreements, ethical norms, treaties, and covenants. Most religious traditions recognize how destructive violence can be, and over the course of time they sometimes attempt to limit it or end it. 6, held captive in the Presbyterian church that my parents chose. And during summer recess, they invited a campus minister to preach, who actually read, understood, and attempted to live as if the Sermon on the Mount rang true. And when he was done preaching, it seemed absolutely clear to me that Jesus was a peacemaker, not a cowboy. And before my eyes, my childhood fantasies of war games and cap guns went up in smoke. When I was 16 years old, the Presbyterian church of my childhood made a big mistake. They invited me to preach on Youth Sunday. This was about 1966 or 67. And so the title I chose, which they chose not to put in the program, was Reflections on the Ethics of Jesus and the Use of Napalm. And I'm pleased to say that several stalwart Presbyterian elders coughed, and when coughing did not relieve their moral distress, they walked out. But luckily enough, two of the people who walked out, including Chester Barnes, the father of a childhood friend, would later serve on my draft board. And about 20 years later, when faced with a 50-page essay from me on why I am a conscientious objector and a dozen letters of reference, they choose to grant me status as a conscientious objector rather than face the prospect of having to listen to me preach to them again. So that third root of deep peace is nonviolence, and it's crucial. And if you grew up in a family where casual violence was tolerated, you know how much harm that can do. The fourth root of deep peace is facing the truth, even when it hurts, even when it's inconvenient. Jesus said the truth will set you free, and 12-step programs have added, but first it will probably make you miserable. Gandhi called his method satyagraha, which means truth force, or the power of truth to transform our lives without violence. Gandhi told the Brits that they would leave India as their friends, and because of his efforts and the efforts of millions of Hindus and Muslims, it came to be true. Probably in part because Gandhi was trained as a lawyer in Britain, and he knew that beneath the layers of power and privilege, if you knew how to poke it, the Brits had a conscience. Facing the truth is never easy. It sometimes requires prompting, the support of people who are willing to tell us the truth that we desperately want not to hear. Have you ever argued with a neighbor or a friend or even a relative about getting vaccinated? It can be challenging, especially if your partner in conversation has embraced a theory that explains everything without benefit of evidence. But we've had some luck when we focus on what really matters. Our heartfelt concern for people we love, even if they vote the wrong way. And if that doesn't work, we have found it quite effective to talk to their children and grandchildren, who have usually figured this business about vaccination and COVID out long before, And at least 2 couples we know who were quite resistant to the idea of getting vaccinated when they were faced by children or grandchildren who said, if you want to see us this year or next, you better get vaccinated. And they did. Peace sometimes requires that we face unpleasant truths. So if you want to visualize this sermon, imagine a circle with peace in the center, and the 4 corners are justice, truth, harmony and unity, and nonviolence. And all the others that I have mentioned. I've asked Thomas to come up and read a couple of poems and to air out the space and enlarge the margins of our hearts and minds. And then in part 2, I'm going to focus on the practical business